What's happening, Buckeye fans? It's Buckeye Freak back again with another Ohio State football report. This time we're talking about Game 1. That's right, we're 13 days away. 13 days away from Minnesota, Ohio State, Thursday night prime time in Minneapolis. This is a big football game. I don't think people around the country who are not diehard Big Ten guys or Ohio State fans, I don't think many people understand what Ohio State has in front of them in Minnesota and how big this football game is or how good Minnesota could be. And that's why I'm here to talk about it. So thanks for joining. Like, subscribe. If you like this video, there'll be a bunch of Ohio State videos now throughout the entire season. So what we have to talk about here is a lot of interesting metrics that say that Minnesota is a trap game, and I'm going to reiterate that and tell you why over the next 10 minutes. First of all, Minnesota was affected perhaps as much as any other team in the country, maybe more affected by COVID than any other team in the country, and that really led, I think, and contributed to a subpar season. But for a lot of reasons, I think we're going to see a gigantic rebound by Minnesota. I'm going to go out on a limb and call now, and I've made some other limb calls so far on these videos. I called for Jack Sawyer to lead in sacks and Trey Henderson to lead in rushing for the Ohio State Buckeyes. And right now I'm going to make another out on a limb prediction and say that Minnesota will win the West and meet again with Ohio State in the Big Ten Championship. So all that said, let's talk about why, okay? The first reason why is P.J. Fleck. P.J. Fleck's a great coach, everybody. Not only is he a great coach, but he's shown, and we've seen time and time again with these great coaches, what can happen when you get your system in place. In 2000, I think it was 16, Western Michigan, I believe, went 13-1. I believe that's right, 13-1. I believe 7-0, whatever it was undefeated in the MAC, and finished in the top 20 nationally. He also finished in the top 20 nationally 2 years ago at Minnesota in 2019. And this year he perhaps brings back more of returning starter class than he's ever had at Minnesota, and his system's in place. The practices are probably at this point rolling like clockwork, and he's looking at Ohio State with a huge target on Ohio State's back, perhaps a little different than Ohio State's looking at Minnesota. I know that Ryan Day has put the focus on Minnesota, saying this is the game in front of them. This is this huge game, the only game that they're caring about right now. But let's not forget that Ohio State is an elite team nationally, and then Minnesota sees this as an opportunity. And let's also not forget this is the first game of the season, and let's also not forget that Ohio State's going to be marching out a quarterback room of which none of the quarterbacks have thrown a college pass, and that we're also playing the game in Minnesota in a newer stadium. It's going to be packed with a hostile crowd. Yes, Ohio State does travel well and will have a lot of fans in that stadium, but it's still going to predominantly be a Minnesota crowd rooting against Ohio State, and it's also going to be the biggest crowd in which these quarterbacks have played and thrown a pass in. So these are big factors in this game, and I also think contributing to that danger is the style of play we're going to see. I think that both teams have made it very clear that they're going to hang their hat on the running game. I think Ohio State is kind of deceiving because we have Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson back, probably the two best receivers in the country. Ohio State touting perhaps the best wide receiving core in the country. I think it is the best wide receiving core in the country. And a quarterback who, while he hasn't thrown a pass, a quarterback with very high expectations and highly rated. Let's face it, we've got Kyle McCord as a backup, and he's a five-star quarterback, a type of quarterback that will probably be starting at Minnesota this year. But C.J. Stroud is still going in there having not thrown a college pass. And this is a big deal because you just don't know how players are going to react in these types of football games in that big environment for the first time. So I was talking about P.J. Fleck getting his system in and how he has turned programs around. These coaches are typically making big moves in year 4 or 5, and if they're not, they're making a move of another sort that they don't want to make to another team, being let go. Definitely not the case with PJ Fleck. Right now, he is not on a hot seat. He's on a cold seat. He's not going anywhere for Minnesota for quite some time, and I think that he is going to turn this team around in 2021 in a big way. Like I said, I'm going to take Minnesota to win the West and probably play Ohio State again late. So let's get back to that kind of game plan. I said that both teams are going to hang their hat on the running game, and that's what makes this another reason for this to be called a trap game, is that the game is going to be sped up, and we're going to be sitting there with not as many drives come early third, mid-third quarter, and saying that that is what's making this a closer game. And I think that's definitely going to be the case. And part of what makes that scary is I don't think people in the country are not only looking at what Minnesota had to deal with last year, or really not thinking enough about the returning starters. Let me tell you, if you count Faalele as a returning starter, which he essentially is, even though he opted out in 2020, with Faalele back, with Olsen back, Schluter back, you've got Olsen and Schluter are both all Big Ten guys, okay? Faalele, don't know if he was all Big Ten, but probably going to be either way, perhaps All-American candidate. They could have a couple All-American candidates on that offensive line, and you can say that they've basically got the entire offensive line back with Faalele calling it, hey, everyone is back on the front, and Ibrahim is a load to deal with at running back, one of the best running backs in the country. That makes this a dangerous football game. Ohio State has a fantastic defensive line, I think underrated by most experts out there simply because of the loss of some big players on the defensive line. But they have a lot of depth there. They have a lot of talent there. So I think that Ohio State is going to be a little bit better up front than they were last year despite the losses. But this is still a tough football game. It's going to be slowed down, and Ohio State's going to do the same thing Minnesota's going to do, which is they're going to hang their hat on the running game. That may or may not play into Ohio State's hands. It just depends on if they're going to trade long sustained drive touchdowns with each other and have a low-scoring affair in the first half. Here's what I think is going to happen. Somebody's going to take a lead, and somebody's going to have to throw the ball at some point. I do like Ohio State's depth playing a role in the third and fourth quarter with all that running that's going to be going on in the first half. I think the Ohio State's depth at all these positions, whether it's O-line, D-line, running back, is going to probably play dividends late just in how fresh the legs are for these players, and being able to roll in certain players. A player like Trey Henderson is a perfect example of somebody that's going to be thrown out there, is going to have fresh legs, and Minnesota does not have a player like that that they're going to be able to get a look from in practice. And that could be a big factor in this game, is that when Trey Henderson is inserted in this game, is he going to make a big play? And I think it's possible he could. He's the type of player that can just break it at any time, and if he does break it, that could be the difference in this football game. But I think the bigger difference in the football game comes with this. Like I said, somebody's going to have a lead, and somebody's going to have to throw the ball, and eventually we're going to see somebody break away from that 3 yards in a cloud of dust at some point in time, probably mid to late third quarter, early fourth quarter. And that's where Ohio State's advantage is. Ohio State's advantage is when that happens, and it doesn't matter who does it or who does it more. When that happens, Ohio State gains an advantage simply because Ohio State is going to be a far superior pass rush team. Ohio State has guys, and this is where I think that, I know it's freshman hype. We've heard the name over and over and over again. But when the Minnesota Morgan, the quarterback, drops back there, say Minnesota's down by 7 or 10 points in the fourth quarter, and they drop back there, what happens then? And the answer to that is probably Tyreek Smith or Jack Sawyer. These are guys that Minnesota does not have, these types of elite rushers. I think Jack Sawyer is that. I know it's hard to put that title on a guy that didn't play as a senior and hasn't taken a college snap in a real live game. But I think it's been shown that Jack Sawyer is going to be an absolute load to deal with if you're trying to throw the ball. Tyreke Smith's the same way, a guy that's been in and out with injuries here and there, but I think that he's another guy that is an elite pass rusher. And between Tyreke Smith and Jack Sawyer, I think that could be the difference in the game. Tanner Morgan drops back, is going to throw the ball, and a turnover happens. Something's going to happen, a sack and a fumble, pressure that leads to an interception and a touchdown. Something like that's going to happen in the pass game and accelerate Ohio State into the lead late, and going to put Minnesota in a situation they don't want to be in, which is they have to throw the ball, and more of the same could happen. Chris Autumn-Bell's a good receiver, but I just don't think they have the horses on the outside if they need it, which they're probably going to come back and win this football game through the air. So again, run first game, close game, first half. I think a lot of factors there are going to lead to that and going to scare a lot of people, especially on the Ohio State side early, where they're just not going to know if Ohio State's going to pull this one out. But I think that's how it plays out. I think it's a super tight game at half. Perhaps Minnesota in the lead, perhaps not. 17-14, 21-17, 20-17, something like that. But everybody's going to go into halftime and have just this big sigh, and maybe they're not as good as we thought. And I'm going to tell you beforehand, it's not that. It's that Minnesota has the horses to run on just about anyone in the country, and Minnesota is going to have a much better football team than people think. Again, going back to that COVID-related issues and some key players back, and so many players back. You know, I look back at my high school football career before I went on to college. In high school, we were 5-5 my junior year, and we were 10-0 in the regular season my senior year, simply because we returned 17 starters that were committed in the offseason to get better as a group and really lead each other into becoming a much better football team. And I think that that's kind of what Minnesota has, that you're looking at the metrics and saying, okay, this could be a big factor. I think it's definitely going to be one of those things people aren't really considering. They're looking at some of the subpar performances of Minnesota, not thinking about the COVID issues with the players, not thinking about some of these other factors and the returning starters and the players that even opted out, like Falele, the 6'9", 400-pound right tackle who didn't play in 2020, coming back, making this, I think, one of the best offensive lines in the country for Minnesota. Definitely underrated. Not quite, I think, the horses up front is Ohio State, but really, really close in that position group. And I think that that's a huge factor for keeping this game close. I said 17-14, 21-17, something like that at half. I'm not going to say who's going to be in the lead. Let's just say it's going to be a tight football game for a while. Perhaps Trey Henderson comes out in the third quarter, makes a big, big play, breaks out with speed that Minnesota can't duplicate in practice and scores a touchdown, accelerates Ohio State to a 28-17 lead. Perhaps Minnesota sticks with the running game for maybe the first half of the third quarter, scores another touchdown, let's say makes it 28-24, and everybody's getting worried. And then we're going to see Minnesota have to throw the football. Ohio State's going to keep packing people in the box and say, now we have the lead, and now we're putting 8 guys in the box, and we're not going to let you do this anymore. And Ohio State probably at that point have given up maybe 250, 300 yards rushing and not feeling all that confident, is going to be forced to pack those guys in the box, and then they're going to start stopping the run really consistently late. And then Minnesota's going to have to throw the ball, and then they're going to pay the price. And that's where we're going to see Ohio State win the football game, is late with the pass rush. Kind of weird. Our best offense is our pass rush defense. Anyway, thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. We're going to have more game previews throughout the season and other updates throughout the season. Go Bucks.